move it on to Trey. Trey, what's going on?
Hi, Mark. I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to your show since about 2021, and when I saw the news, I figured I'd give a call.
Awesome. Well, thank you for watching and supporting and all those good things, and it's great to hear from you.
Yeah, mainly concerning Washington and Oregon being qualified. I don't really see that as the main goal for the Big Ten, considering that there are bigger fish in the pond, so to speak, particularly with Notre Dame, because that's the crown jewel. They're one of the only independents left that's worth grabbing. And should the ACC's contracts be dodgeable, they should probably go for Clemson, Florida State, and Miami for the aforementioned reasons of getting into that Florida pipeline. So I don't really, for those reasons, I don't really see that Oregon or Washington joining the Big Ten unless both of those contingencies fail. Are we pretty much on the same page there?
I believe that the likelihood of Oregon and Washington joining the Big Ten, the possibility is strong, but I don't know that it's 50-50. So I would agree with you on the ACC side, as I stated minutes ago, and have a number of times on other videos and live streams that, and this is my perspective and my recommendation. This is not me speaking for the Big Ten, that I would go to Florida and go after Florida State and Miami first and foremost. But there is the grant of rights. And for as much as the Big Ten is playing the long game, there may not be a long game to play in terms of its battle with the SEC if it does not go in the direction in which they could. So for example, let's say your two prized commodities that you are targeting, you judge to have a 25% chance of getting those two commodities, whatever those are. But you think that two other commodities are nearly as strong, they're not your preference, but they're the next two in line, and you've got an 80% chance of getting them. So what I'm saying here is that the Big Ten may be in a battle with the SEC in 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, certainly in 12 years for those remaining ACC schools, whereas we know that Oregon and Washington, they've applied for the Big Ten, they want to join the Big Ten, that they are there for the taking. And so maybe the Big Ten only wants to be so big, or maybe they would consider, or maybe they are planning on adding on both coasts, because they've already added to the West Coast. They would be adding history, tradition, connections to that side of the country to help out the USC, UCLA contingent. So they've already gone in that direction. So do you understand what I'm saying? It's not necessarily exclusive. They might be going for both, or might be considering both. I don't think there's any question they're considering both directions.
Right. Also, given Notre Dame's geographic location, it would make the most sense to grab Notre Dame. The issue I see there is that Notre Dame has bad blood with the Big Ten, and they've already turned down Big Ten invitations before.
Yep.
So should Notre Dame be a dead end, and should the ACC schools be a dead end, Oregon and Washington are decent pickups.
Well, absolutely they are. Yeah. Again, anytime I've argued both sides, meaning Oregon, Washington is great additions versus Oregon, Washington, it can't be argued that they're awful additions, just less likely additions. The only questions that I couldn't answer would be the value of the TV contracts meeting a certain level to which it would make sense financially for the Big Ten to add Oregon and Washington, but based on, I alluded to this in the conversation with Tim on the last call, but I've said this a million times in the last few months, that the Big Ten's in a great financial spot. Now, I don't think that they're getting their calculators out and thinking, okay, even if NBC and CBS didn't pony up the money to make it cost effective, that they're figuring out, okay, if we add Oregon and Washington, CBS and NBC are only going to add X number of dollars. Therefore, we're going to have to take $1.8 million away from each school and their money distribution, their revenue, TV revenue distribution each year. So it's done. We're not doing that. No, I think their review of the situation is way beyond that in terms of assessing value. It's not all about just, we got 100 million, we're dividing by X number of schools. Now we got 112 million, we're dividing by X number of schools. So therefore, I don't believe it's coming down to just that.
Right.
It's
Certain
much
endowments for
more-
schools are just ridiculous these days.
Yeah, they've
Like,
got a lot more
Stanford.
vision than that, and a lot more perspective to just be grinding it down to the penny.
All right. I also heard that the Big Ten was no longer interested in expanding after they picked up UCLA and Southern Cal.
You heard
I'm
that?
pretty sure an addition of Notre Dame or Stanford or even some of those ACC schools would change their mind, don't you think?
Where did you hear that? And
Tony
I'm not saying
Altimore?
that other people have not said that, but
Right. This may have been when they had their previous commissioner, but I do remember Tony Altimore saying that the Big Ten was done expanding.
so I don't want to speak for Tony, and I know what you're saying. He has made the exception, I believe, about the Stanford route for one thing, like a combination, maybe Stanford Cal, but certainly Stanford Notre Dame. But again, I don't want to speak for Tony. I believe that if you look at the recent comments just in the last few weeks from the new Big Ten commissioner, Tony Petitti, and then also the chancellor at the University of Illinois, they have left it wide open for this conference to expand. They basically said, this is not a priority in the moment, right now. Well, there's a reason they tack on those conditions. Right now, well, that could mean today. That could mean this week. That could mean we're in a board meeting and we're taking a coffee break, and then our afternoon session, we're going to change the agenda. Like, they have left it wide open. Like, I don't take any of that rhetoric. It's almost like the rhetoric that's come out of Colorado, Arizona State in the last 3 or 4 months about, we believe in our conference, we have faith, we're optimistic about having a great rights deal, blah, blah, blah. They've said all the right things, but they've even left it open to, but you never know. We're in talks, we're in conversations, we're always open to whatever may happen.
Okay. And in relation to the Pac-12 being quote unquote done or dead, I don't believe that, because when it came to the Big 12, they have lost Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, Texas A&M, Texas, and Oklahoma. Those were some of their biggest legacy schools. They're all gone, and they're still around. If the Big 12 can figure it out, then the Pac-12 could figure it out, even if they lose Oregon and Washington.
Now, that's
Now,
a great point on one hand, but those all happened at different times, of course, and they were able to supplement elsewhere.
that's where I was going. The Pac-12 needs to be more vigilant than they currently are, because all I've heard is Southern Methodist and San Diego State to be in their expansion plans. That pretty much hit a dead end right around March. I haven't heard anything else unless I'm just out of the loop on something. And say they do lose Oregon and Washington, what next? Because the Big 12 was very aggressive when it came to finding new suitors, and I'm not seeing that same aggression with the Pac-12.
Yeah, so if this were 10 years ago, and where it seemed as though until like the Big Ten more than any other conference, but the other conferences as well, just completely stepped out of their geographic bounds and just, it's become a coast to coast, free for all. I would have said, well, the Pac-12 has nowhere to go. They've got SMU and they've got San Diego State and they've got various schools that don't add enough in the Mountain West. Fresno State, possibly from a football standpoint, I don't think they add anything else beyond that. But in this climate, then maybe they go, I don't know. I don't know how like a Tulane or a Memphis would assess what's going on in the Pac-12. Maybe they would simply assess it as Tony has explained to us recently, and looking at the charts of football and athletics revenue, the American Conference, for being the best of the group of fives on the field, is losing the most money. So maybe those schools would say, hey, even though the Pac-12 is a bit shaky, we're group of five schools right now. So if we can go from making $5 or $6 or $8 million a year in TV revenue to $25 million a year in revenue, and play on a big stage where we can compete for a playoff spot, let's go.
Right.
So my thinking would have been much more confined, and I think everybody else, to geography, even just a few years ago. But that's been totally torn down. Not that it's, I'm sure I think these conferences consider it because of logistics and travel, but obviously it's nothing to what it was years ago, to where that would have been the first thing we would have been thinking about. Well, USC and UCLA aren't going to join the Big Ten. They're 3,000 miles away.
Right. Yeah, well, it's a very volatile world, specifically for college football and, just the NCAA in general.
I appreciate the call, Ray.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
All right, let's keep it rolling here.